A bare hand comes to rest on Tywin Lannister's breastplate. It does not push. In 2 seconds, the old lion is white to the eyes, and the sword in his fist has frosted solid. And the boy who touched him says, very quietly, "My father believed in the law, my lord. I believe in ice." Walder Frey opens his eyes in a hall full of his own murdered sons, and they are blue. An army in stark gray walks across the Blackwater without breaking the surface, and a 16-year-old king walks straight through a wall of wildfire, and the green flame goes white and dies around him. Everyone knows how Robb Stark died. Almost nobody asks the other question. Why, in 8,000 years, did no Stark ever do what he did that night? Because they knew better. There is an old rule in the North, older than the Kings of Winter, older than the Wall. And it is not written in any book, because it was never supposed to need writing down. A lord of Winterfell does not go into the Godswood alone in the first grief. Not after a father, not after a child. Somebody always goes with him. For 8,000 years, every Stark who ever lost someone was walked to that heart tree by a brother, a maester, a wife, and every one of them assumed it was a kindness. It was not a kindness, it was a guard posting. And on the night Robb Stark finally walked down to that heart tree, the only other Starks under that roof were a crippled boy of 7 and a child of 4, both asleep upstairs. And for the first time in 8,000 years, nobody stood the post. The night is dark and full of theories. What if Robb Stark walked into that Godswood alone and made a bargain whose actual terms he did not understand until the very last minute of his life? Let's explore the absolute frozen depths of this dark, aggressive, and completely rewritten history of Westeros in our video today. And stay to the end, because by the time we reach that throne room, you are going to understand exactly why Jon Snow's first instinct on seeing his own brother crowned was to reach for his sword. In the history we know, Robb Stark won every battle he ever fought and lost the war anyway, because he was 15 playing against men who had been cheating for 40 years, and because the one weapon he refused to pick up was the one everybody else was using. He died on a floor at the Twins under guest right over bread and salt, and the gods did nothing at all. But what if the grief had gone somewhere else? And what if the thing waiting on the other side of that heart tree had been waiting 8,000 years for exactly one Stark to be angry enough to ask? This is not the story of a boy who lost his temper. It is the story of a very intelligent young man who negotiates hard with something that does not negotiate, wins every single thing he asks for, and finds out, one payment at a time, what he actually agreed to. Before we witness the dead rising at the Twins and the Iron Throne itself turning to ice, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If this video reaches 8,000 likes, we will immediately begin writing the sequel, The War of the Two Wolves. Also, join our Discord server, linked in the description below, to debate Westerosi lore with fellow fans. Now, adjust your armor, draw your blades, and let us travel to the Winterfell Godswood, on the night a king decides that honor is a debt he is finished paying. Act 1. The Death of the Sun. The divergence in this story is not a battle, a marriage, or a betrayal. It is the decision one boy makes alone in the snow in the 298th year after Aegon's conquest, and everything else in this story is simply the invoice. Robb Stark is 15 years old, and he is not yet a king at all. He is the Lord of Winterfell and the commander of a northern host camped around Riverrun. And the Raven from King's Landing arrives in the gray hour before dawn. Eddard Stark is dead. Not murdered in the dark, not lost in battle. Tried, condemned, and beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor in front of a cheering crowd by a boy of 12 with the whole of the realm watching and approving. Robb reads it twice. He says nothing at all for a very long moment. Then the great Jon Umber puts his sword on the table in front of him and asks him why in 7 hells the North should kneel to any king south of the Neck ever again. And by nightfall, every Northern and Riverlands lord in that hall has done the same, and Robb Stark is king in the North. And 4 days after they crown him, the king in the north walks out of his own camp before dawn, takes a horse from the stables, with 6 guards and no banner, and rides north. Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, catching him in the yard before he goes, "Robb, you have 18,000 men outside this castle, and Jaime Lannister in a cell inside it. Trade him. Trade him for your sisters, today, before Tywin has time to think, and then treat with the Vale and the Reach, because there are still men in both who owed your father everything. We do this properly. We do it by the law, and we bring Sansa and Arya home alive." Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, and he does not raise his voice at all, which frightens her far more than shouting would have. "Father followed the law, mother. He followed it all the way to a block. He had the truth. He had the right of it. He had the honor of the entire realm on his side. And a 12-year-old boy with a crown killed him for sport in front of a crowd that clapped. The law is not a thing that exists. It is a story that powerful men tell each other to keep the rest of us predictable. I am finished being predictable." 19 days up the King's Road, 6 guards, no banner, 4 hours of sleep a night. He does not explain to any of them why the king in the north has walked away from an army in the middle of a war. He arrives at Winterfell an hour before sunset, and Bran and Rickon are in the yard before the gate has finished opening, because word ran ahead of him from Castle Cerwyn, and they have been sitting on the steps since noon. Rickon Stark says to Robb Stark, from somewhere around his belt, "Osha says you're a king now. Are you a king? Are you bringing father home?" Robb Stark says to Rickon Stark, and it costs him something to say it. "Father is not coming home, Rickon." He eats supper with them in the Great Hall that night. He lets Bran ask 40 questions about the Whispering Wood and answers every one properly, and he carries Rickon up to bed himself. And at the middle hour of the night, Robb Stark takes a lantern and walks out into the Godswood alone. Maester Luwin offers to come with him. Luwin does not know why he offers. It is simply a thing the Maesters of Winterfell have always done, passed down through 400 years of grey chains, as a courtesy that nobody has ever thought to question. Robb tells him no. Bran is 7 and cannot walk, and Rickon is 4, and both of them are asleep in the rooms above, and there is not one other living soul of Stark blood inside those walls. For the first time in 8,000 years, a Lord of Winterfell goes into that Godswood in the first grief, with nobody standing behind him. The Godswood is 3 feet deep in snow, and the black pool at the foot of the heart tree has not frozen, because it never freezes. Robb kneels in front of a face carved by people whose names are gone, and he does not pray. Praying is asking. What he does instead is call the old gods out into the open, the way one lord calls out another, and demand that they finally answer for 8,000 years of watching. Robb Stark says to the Heart Tree, "You have watched this family for 8,000 years. My grandfather burned alive in a throne room 900 miles from here, and you did nothing. My aunt died in a bed somewhere in Dorne, and you did nothing. My father knelt down on those steps, and you did nothing. I have never once asked you for anything. I am asking now. I do not want comfort, and I do not want justice. I want the power to end them, and I do not care in the slightest what it is made of." The pool freezes. It happens all at once, edge to center, with a crack like a mountain splitting, and the temperature in that Godswood drops so far and so fast that the sap on the heart tree's face stops running mid-drip and hangs there, red and solid. The mist that comes up off the new ice does not behave like mist. It stands, and out of it, without a footstep, comes something tall. It is not a man, and it has not been one for a very long time. It wears armor that is not metal, translucent and jagged, grown rather than forged, and its face is the color of old bone underwater, and its eyes are 2 points of blue so cold and so bright that Robb's own eyes water looking at them. It does not speak. What it does is put words directly into the marrow of Robb's bones, in a voice that is more like pressure than sound, and it does not use a language Robb knows, and he understands every word perfectly. The Night King says to Robb Stark, inside his skull, 8,000 years. Every winter, one of your blood comes to this tree, and every winter they ask for spring. You are the first who has asked for the other thing. Robb Stark says to the Night King, can you give it to me? Not soldiers, not a season, the end of House Lannister, the end of the Freys, the end of every man who stood in that square and cheered. The Night King says to Robb Stark, I can give you an army that does not eat, does not sleep, does not desert, does not tire, and cannot be bribed by anyone in the world. It grows every time it fights. Every man who falls in front of you stands up behind you before his body has cooled. No living king in this realm can stand against it for one season. Robb Stark says to the Night King, and the price. The Night King says to Robb Stark, your price is everything that makes you a man. You get your vengeance. I get a world without a pulse. Robb Stark says to the Night King, all at once? The Night King says to Robb Stark, no, that would be a mercy. It is not one payment, Wolf. It is a debt with a schedule, and you will pay it in the only currency you have, and I will take it from the top of the pile downward. First the small things you will not miss for a month, then the things you will notice and tell yourself you can live without, then the ones you cannot. You will get everything you have asked for, every single thing, and at the end of it there will be a king sitting on that chair with your face on him. Whether there is any of you left inside, it is a question I have never yet had to answer, because no one has ever asked me twice. Robb Stark kneels in the snow for a long moment. Robb Stark says to the Night King, take it. He presses his palm flat against the frozen bark of the heart tree, and a hand that is not made of anything closes over the back of it. There is no pain. There is no cold either. That is the part that will bother him afterward, on the nights when things still bother him. There is simply an absence, arriving, like a door opening onto a room with nothing in it. Robb Stark walks out of that Godswood at dawn, and the first payment has already been taken, and it is so small that he does not notice it for 6 days. Then, on the road south, Grey Wind comes to him in camp the way he has every evening since he was a pup, and stops 8 feet away and will not come closer, and after a moment lies down facing him, watching, with his ears flat. By the neck, the wolf will not come into the camp at all. By the twins he has begun, every night at moonrise, to point his head at his master's tent and howl, the long, rising, unmistakable note that direwolves make at a thing that should not be alive. The men hear it. Every night, all night, they hear it. Nobody in that entire army needs it explained to them, because Grey Wind has been the truest thing in Robb Stark's life since both of them were pups, and he has just told 18,000 Northmen exactly what is sitting in that tent. Act 2. The March of the Silent Pack. Robb Stark rides back down the King's Road in 11 days, which is 8 days faster than he went up it, and nobody who sees him arrive at Riverrun asks him where he has been. The host he takes north out of the Riverlands that autumn is roughly 18,000 men, and within a fortnight every one of them knows that something is wrong, and not one of them can say what. There are no songs on the march. Nobody decides this, it simply stops happening. The horses will not settle at night. The scouts come back, they always come back, but they come back quiet, and 2 of them ask to be moved to the rear guard and will not say why. And every morning the column finds it has covered 11 or 12 miles more than the maps say it should have. Roose Bolton has been watching all of it, with the flat, patient attention of a man reading an interesting ledger. Roose Bolton says to Robb Stark, Your Grace, may I make an observation? It has been 9 days since I have seen you eat. It has been longer than that since I have seen you take a cloak in weather that has 3 of my own men down with frostbite. And this morning, while you were giving orders on the ridge, I watched you speak for some considerable time in an air temperature well below freezing, and there was no breath in front of your mouth. None at all. I mention it because other men are beginning to notice, and other men are not as comfortable with unusual things as I am. Robb Stark says to Roose Bolton, "And are you comfortable, my lord?" Roose Bolton says to Robb Stark, "Comfortable is not the word, your grace. I find I am admiring. I have spent my whole life in a country that kills people for 4 months of every year and calls it weather. It has always seemed to me that the North's great mistake was pretending to be Southern about it. And I have spent all of it being told that I am the cold one. I am not, as it turns out. I am simply the coldest thing anyone in this hall had met until 19 days ago. If your grace has found a way to stop pretending, then I have waited my entire life to serve a man who is finally colder than I am, and I would very much like to see where it goes." Robb Stark says to Roose Bolton, "It goes to the twins, my lord. Lord Walder has a bridge I need, and a great many daughters he wants married, and 11 days ago he sent a raven to Tywin Lannister, asking what his loyalty might be worth in the current market. I know this because I have begun to know things I have not been told. We are going to go and discuss it with him." There is one thing Roose Bolton does not observe, because Robb has become extremely careful about when he lets it be seen. Twice now, on the road, Robb has closed his eyes in the saddle and found himself looking down at his own column from 400 feet up, through the eyes of a bird that is not alive. The weirwood net runs under everything in the north, like roots under a field, and something has opened it up for him, and there is a great deal in there that a 15-year-old was never meant to be able to see all at once. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, the reports reaching Harrenhal have stopped making sense. Tywin Lannister says to Sir Kevan Lannister, holding 3 of them, "A blizzard moving south at a fixed rate of 30 miles a day, in autumn, against the prevailing wind. 2 separate scouting parties that rode into it and did not ride out. And a captured northern outrider who told my interrogators nothing whatsoever for 6 hours, and then began laughing and would not stop. Kevin, I have been fighting this realm's wars for 40 years. I know precisely what it looks like when frightened men invent a monster to explain a defeat." Sir Kevan Lannister says to Tywin Lannister, "And is that what this is?" Tywin Lannister says to Sir Kevan Lannister, after a pause that goes on slightly too long, "That is what it had better be. Move the wagons off the King's Road and send to Casterly Rock for another 8,000. And Kevin, say nothing about laughing outriders to anybody at all." Act 3. The Red Wedding Reversed. The twins stand across the green fork like 2 rotten teeth, and Walder Frey has been ready for 3 weeks. He has the crossbowmen in the musicians' gallery. He has the letter from Roose Bolton that never arrived, because the man who was carrying it is currently walking somewhere in the middle of Robb Stark's column with blue in his eyes. He has bread and salt on the table, and Lannister gold in his cellar, and 92 years of certainty that the world belongs to whoever is willing to be the most disgusting about it. What he does not have is any idea what is coming up the causeway. Catelyn Stark rides beside her son that morning. She went north up the King's Road after him the week he vanished, met him on the road coming back down out of the Neck, and rode the whole long way to Riverrun at his side. And in all those days she asked him nothing at all, and watched him constantly. Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark at the head of the bridge, "Robb, I have not asked. I have watched you not eat and not sleep, and I have watched Grey Wind stop coming to your hand, and I have not asked. I am asking now, before you walk into that castle. What did you do?" Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, "I made an arrangement, mother." Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, "With whom?" Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, looking straight at her, "With the only party in this entire realm that has ever kept its word to this family." He rides to the gate alone, and the men on the walls of the twins get a long look at what has come to collect from them. He has no crown of gold. He stopped wearing it somewhere south of the neck. His hair is white to the roots, and frost stands in it in a rough circlet that does not melt. His skin has gone the color and texture of old parchment stretched over bone, and there is rime on his eyelashes, and it does not clear when he blinks. He is 16 years old. He looks like something that has been in the ground for a season and has come back up with an errand. Walder Frey says to Robb Stark from the gatehouse balcony, "Late! Late for your own wedding, your grace, and bringing weather with you. Well, come in, come in. We've bread and salt on the table, and a girl who's been waiting, and we'll say no more about oaths and such. Bygones. Come in out of the cold." Robb Stark says to Walder Frey, I am not coming in, my lord, and neither are my men. Not one Northman will cross your threshold today, and not one of us will touch your bread or your salt. I want that noted by every man on that wall, because I want it perfectly clear afterward that guest right was never given here, and never broken here, and does not apply to what is about to happen. Walder Frey says to Robb Stark, and something has gone out of his voice. Then what in seven hells have you come for? Robb Stark says to Walder Frey, 11 days ago you wrote to Tywin Lannister and asked him what my head was worth. He wrote back, I know what he offered you, Lord Walder, and I know what you were going to have your musicians do about it. And I have not come to punish you for it, because I do not much care about you. I have come for your bridge. Open your gates and hand me your castle, and every man of yours walks out of it alive and keeps his name. Or do not. Walder Frey does not open the gates. 92 years of getting away with it is a very hard habit to break, and he has crossbows. Robb Stark lifts his hand. The thing about the Green Fork is that it has been a battlefield on and off for 3,000 years, and rivers keep everything they are given. The ice on it has been thickening for 6 days. Now it splits, the whole length of it at once, with a crack that men hear at fair market. And the river gives them back. Not an army, an inventory. Riverland's men-at-arms in Tully blue so faded it is gray, their scale rotted off the leather in patches. Northmen in mail 3 centuries out of fashion, with the direwolf still faintly visible on what is left of their surcoats. Men who died fighting Freys and Brackens and Blackwoods before anyone alive was born. Drowned levies from border squabbles nobody living remembers the name of. Children. Whole families from a village that flooded in some forgotten spring. Hundreds of them, and then thousands, hauling themselves up out of the Blackwater and up the wet stone of the twins, hand over hand, silent, unhurried, water sheeting off them and freezing as it falls, and in every single empty socket, the blue coming up like a lamp being lit. Crossbows do nothing. Steel does nothing. A sword goes into a white and stays there, and the white keeps coming with the sword in it. The Frey guards die in the yard and are back on their feet before the fighting has finished moving down the corridor. And then Walder Frey's sons come into his hall. They died in the yard 11 minutes ago, and they are still wet. Black Walder's throat is open to the spine, and his head is not sitting properly on his neck. And he is walking. Lame Lothar drags a leg that is bent the wrong way at the knee and does not appear to notice. They come up the length of the hall between the tables, past the bread and salt, in complete silence, and they do not stop to be spoken to, and their father is screaming at them by name. Lothar, Walder, Raymond, I am your father, I made you. And not one of them so much as looks at his face. They take him under the arms. They lift a 92-year-old man out of his own chair like a rolled carpet, and they carry him down the hall to the doors and out into the snow, to where the king in the north is waiting, and the whole time Walder Frey is shrieking, and the whole time his sons say nothing at all. Robb Stark walks through it without hurrying, and his boots make no sound at all on the stone. Catelyn Stark catches her son in the doorway as he follows them out, and she says to Robb Stark, with her back against the wood and her hand over her mouth, "This is not the old gods. This is not the North. Robb, whatever that thing is, it is not on our side. It is on its own side. It has always been on its own side." Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, "It has kept every term of the arrangement exactly as agreed, which is more than the 7 ever managed, and considerably more than Walder Frey managed, and rather more than the law of this realm managed for father." Outside, in the snow, they set him down in front of Robb Stark, and by the time they let go of him, Walder Frey has stopped screaming, because Walder Frey has stopped everything. Robb crouches down beside him, where the blue is already coming up. Robb Stark says to the corpse of Walder Frey, "Get up, my lord. You wanted a place in the New Order badly enough to sell me to Tywin Lannister for it. You have one. You will walk south ahead of my host, all the way to the gates of King's Landing, and you will not stop, and you will not be permitted to rot. And everyone between here and there is going to see exactly what happened to the last man who thought he was clever." The corpse of Walder Frey gets up, and then it does something that no white in the whole of that army has done, before or since. It leans in, close to the king in the north, the way an old man leans in to share a confidence at a table. And it whispers a single word to him. 18,000 Northmen see it happen. Not one of them hears the word. What every man near enough to see his face will swear to for the rest of his life is what happened to Robb Stark in the half-second afterward. That the young wolf's face came back. All of it. The boy from the training yard, the boy who laughed, the one they had all followed out of Winterfell, surfaced for about the length of a heartbeat. And it was full of absolute animal terror. Then it went away again, and he turned his horse and gave the order to march. Hold on to that word. We are going to tell you what it was, and we are going to do it in the throne room, because there is nowhere else in this story where it makes any sense at all. And that night, camped on the ruins of the twins, Robb Stark takes the second payment. It is not warmth this time. He is sitting by a fire he does not need, trying to bring his father's face to mind. And it comes. All of it. The gray eyes, the long face, the way he sat a horse, the sound of his voice in the yard on a cold morning. Every fact of Eddard Stark, filed and accurate and complete. Robb Stark still remembers that Ned Stark is his father. He no longer remembers what it felt like to be loved by him. He turns it over for an hour, patting his own memory down the way a man pats his pockets for a key he knows he had. It is not in there. It has been taken out, carefully, without damaging anything around it, and the space where it was does not even ache. He notes it. He decides it is an acceptable price. That decision is the third payment, and he does not notice that one at all. Catelyn Stark leaves the host at dawn the next morning. She does it openly. She has her horse saddled in the middle of the camp, in front of 600 men, and she waits until her son comes out to her, because she has decided that whatever this is going to be, it is not going to happen in a tent where people can pretend it did not. Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, "I am going to River Run. My father is dying and my brother will need me. And those are both true things, and neither of them is why I am going." Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, "Say the reason then." Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, "Because last night I watched you crouch down beside Walder Frey's body and give it an instruction, and it obeyed you, and your face while you did it was the face you used to make doing sums with Maester Luwin. Not cruel, interested. Robb, I have lost my husband and my father is dying, and 2 of my daughters are hostages in a city I cannot reach. You are the only one of my children I could still put my arms around, and 4 days ago I tried, and you let me, and there was nothing on the other side of it. Nothing at all. I am not leaving because I am frightened of what is following your army. I am leaving because I am frightened that there is no longer anybody inside my son to say goodbye to, and I would rather go now, while I can still tell myself I might be wrong." Robb Stark stands in the snow and looks at his mother, and reaches quite deliberately for the grief he knows ought to be there, and finds the place where it is filed, and finds it empty, the way a man finds a shelf. Robb Stark says to Catelyn Stark, "Take 20 riders. The road through Fairmarket is clear. I know it is clear because I have looked at it. Mother, I am going to get Sansa and Arya out of that city. That part has not changed, whatever else has." Catelyn Stark says to Robb Stark, "I know it has not. That is the part I cannot forgive, Robb. If you had gone mad, I could grieve you. You have not gone mad. You are still keeping every promise you ever made to me. There is simply nothing left underneath them." She rides out. She does not look back, and he does not watch her go, and that is the fourth payment, and it is the first one he genuinely notices while it is happening. 900 miles to the north, in a room in Winterfell that has not been properly warm in 2 months, a boy who cannot walk wakes up screaming. Bran Stark has been dreaming about the Godswood since the night his brother slept under this roof and rode south again at dawn without saying goodbye to anybody. In the dream, he is always inside the tree, looking down through the carved eyes at the snow, and there is always someone kneeling in front of him, and it is always that same night, and he can never quite see the face. Tonight, for the first time, the kneeling figure looks up. Bran Stark says to Maester Luwin, gripping his sleeve hard enough to bruise, "It was Robb. It was the night he was here, Lewin. The night he ate supper with us and carried Rickon up to bed. He went out to the Godswood after we were asleep, and he knelt down, and there was something standing on the ice that had no shadow. And Lewin, the tree was letting it in. The tree opened. It was not being tricked. It was not being forced. It was letting it in, the way you would hold a door for somebody you knew. Maester Lewin says to Bran Stark, in the voice men use for children with fevers, "It is a dream, Bran." Bran Stark says to Maester Lewin, "I dreamt about father in the crypts 3 days before the raven came from King's Landing. I told you, and you said the same thing then." Maester Lewin does not have an answer for that, and he is honest enough with himself later that night to admit that the reason he does not have one is not that the boy is wrong. Bran sends a raven south to his brother at the Twins the following morning. It is 4 lines long, and it says, in a 9-year-old's careful hand, that whatever came out of the pool is not the old gods, and that it should be sent back. The raven leaves Winterfell and flies south and never arrives anywhere, and by the 3rd day something eats it in the air above the neck. Act 4. The Southern Panic. By the time the host reaches the Trident, it is no longer possible to pretend anything. The living part of Robb's army is still 18,000 men, and every one of them is now a specialist in not looking to his left. The other part is somewhere north of 60,000 and growing at every village, because in a country that has been at war for a year, the ground is generous. Among them, mounted, in the places of honor at the front of the column, ride the great Jon Umber and Rickard Karstark, who both took a Lannister raiding party in the fog outside Derry with more courage than sense, and who are both still on their horses, and still in command of their men, and still absolutely and unquestioningly loyal to their king. Their men have noticed that neither lord has spoken in 9 days. Their men have decided not to raise it. It is below Harrenhal that the living part of Robb Stark's army finally breaks. And not the way anybody expects. No mutiny, nobody draws a sword. On a gray morning outside a burnt village called Sallydance, 400 Northmen form up in good order, in daylight, and walk out of the column heading north. Robb rides out to them himself. He does not bring the dead. Robb Stark says to Sir Helman Tallhart, "You are going home." Sir Helman Tallhart says to Robb Stark, and his voice is shaking, and he says it anyway, "Aye, your grace, we are. And before you say the word deserter, I have been at your back since the Whispering Wood. I lost my brother at the Green Fork, and I would still put myself between you and any living man in this world. But 4 nights ago, I woke up and there was a boy standing at the edge of my fire that I buried myself at Oxcross, your grace. I buried him. I know what his face looked like when I put the earth on it. And he was standing at my fire, and he was waiting for orders. Your orders. I cannot do it. I am not a coward, and I am not a traitor, and I cannot do it." Robb Stark looks at 400 men who have followed him for a year and a half and understands quite clearly that he ought to feel something at this moment, and waits to see whether he will. Robb Stark says to Sir Helman Tallhart, "Take your men and your horses, and enough grain for the road. Nobody will follow you. Nobody will trouble your lands. And Sir Helman, when you get north, bar your gates and lay in wood. Not against me, just lay in wood." They go. They're the last living men who ever leave Robb Stark's army under their own power, and every one of them makes it home, which is precisely the detail that will make the story so much worse when it spreads. In King's Landing, Joffrey Baratheon laughs at the reports and calls the Northmen mummers, and orders the man who brought the last one whipped. Tywin Lannister does not laugh. Tywin Lannister says to Cersei Lannister, in a council chamber with the windows shuttered against a cold that has arrived 2 months early, "Understand our position. The Riverlands are not lost in the sense that a battle is lost. They are gone. There is no army in them anymore, because everything we sent has joined the other side. And I use the word joined precisely and literally. I have 4 separate accounts, from men I trust, of soldiers who died at the Green Fork, standing up an hour later and walking south with the enemy. I am no longer asking whether this is true. I am asking what can be done about it." Cersei Lannister says to Tywin Lannister, "It is a trick, father. Hedge sorcerers and mummers and frightened peasants. We are Lannisters. We do not..." Tywin Lannister says to Cersei Lannister, "We are Lannisters, and in 10 weeks we will be Lannister-shaped pieces of meat walking south in somebody else's column, unless the next words out of my mouth are useful ones. Send to Highgarden. Offer Marjorie to Joffrey. Offer Loras whatever he wants. Offer Mace Tyrell the handship if it comes to that. And send to the Guild of Alchemists and tell them the crown will buy every jar of wildfire they have ever made, and every jar they can produce between now and the first snow, at any price they name, and that I will personally hang any man who tells me it cannot be done in time." Tyrion Lannister is on the battlements at dusk when he sees the first one arrive. It comes in low over the Blackwater, and it is a raven the way a thing can be a raven with most of its feathers gone, and one wing broken and reset at an angle no living bird could fly with. It circles the Red Keep twice, at leisure, while 3 separate archers fail to hit it. Then it drops something small onto the stones 20 feet from where Tyrion is standing, and flies north. It is a winter rose, blue, frozen solid, perfectly preserved, of a kind that has not grown anywhere south of the neck in living memory. But Tywin Lannister has no intention of surrendering his city to a dead army, and he has one weapon left that no northern boy and no ice god has accounted for. A weapon that has been sitting under this city for 20 years, waiting for someone desperate enough to use it. We will get to it, and it very nearly works. Tyrion Lannister says to himself, looking at it for a long moment without picking it up, "That is not a threat. A threat has a demand attached to it. That is a man telling us he already knows how this ends, and being polite enough to send flowers ahead." There is one person in that castle who understands exactly what the rose means, and she has told nobody, because she has spent a year learning that the single most valuable thing a girl can own in the Red Keep is a face that gives away nothing at all. Sansa Stark has been watching the reports come in for 6 weeks. She has heard the word blizzard used by grown men in a tone she has never heard grown men use. She has watched the Queen stop mentioning her brother by name, and she knows blue winter roses because they grow in the glass gardens at Winterfell and nowhere else in the world, and because her father used to put one in the crypts every year on a day he never explained to anybody. Sansa Stark says to Sir Dontos Hollard in the Godswood at the only hour she is ever unwatched, "They will take me out of the city when the walls fall, not to save me. Cersei said it to my face last week. She said a Stark girl is worth more alive than the city is, and she was not being kind when she said it. I need a way out before that, and I do not have one, and there is nobody left in these walls who owes my family anything." Sir Dontos Hollard says to Sansa Stark, "My lady, if half of what they are saying about your brother is true..." Sansa Stark says to Sir Dontos Hollard, "If half of what they are saying about my brother is true, then he is not coming here to rescue me, sir. He is coming here to finish something. And I have thought about it a great deal, and I do not know which of those 2 things frightens me more." She keeps the rose. She picks it up off the stones an hour after Tyrion walks away from it, and she puts it inside her sleeve, and she carries it against her wrist for the rest of the siege, and she does not once let herself work out why. Act 5. The Siege of Gold and Bone. Stannis Baratheon comes up the Blackwater in the last week of autumn with 180 ships and close to 20,000 men, because Stannis Baratheon has spent his entire life doing the correct thing at the least convenient possible moment. And the correct thing, by every law of inheritance ever written in this realm, is to take his dead brother's throne back from the incest-born boy squatting on it, and to do it now, while every eye in the 7 kingdoms is pointed north. He arrives to find the bay freezing around his halls. Not the harbor, the bay. Saltwater going to plate ice at a rate his own maester tells him is not possible, while the mist comes down so thick that the rear of his own line vanishes. Robb Stark walks out to meet him on the ice, on foot, alone. Stannis Baratheon says to Robb Stark from the rail of the Fury, with his sword drawn and burning, "I know what you have done, Stark. My priestess has been screaming about you in her fires for a month. You are carrying the great other's hand on the back of your neck, and you have brought his winter down onto the Seven Kingdoms to settle a family grievance. Stand down, do penance to the Lord of Light, and I will grant you a clean death and your father's name intact." Robb Stark says to Stannis Baratheon, "Your brother let my father die, Lord Stannis. Your brother's wife arranged it, and your brother's son ordered it. And you sat on a rock and wrote letters about inheritance law. You are here because there is a chair you believe is yours. I am here for the extinction of a bloodline. One of us has an actual reason to be standing on this ice, and it is not the man with the burning sword and the excellent legal argument." Stannis Baratheon says to Robb Stark, "And when the Lannisters are gone, what then, boy? What does a man like you do the morning after he runs out of enemies?" It is the first question anybody has asked him in 4 months that Robb Stark cannot immediately answer, and the pause before he speaks is half a heartbeat too long. And Stannis Baratheon, who is many things, but is nobody's fool, sees it. Robb Stark says to Stannis Baratheon, "Turn your ships around." Stannis does not turn his ships around. What happens to the royal fleet is not a battle. The ice does not crack under the holes. It rises around them, in ridges and then in spires, and 180 ships are lifted, tilted, and held. Then it closes. Men go into water that is freezing as they hit it, and about a third of them do not come back up, and the rest come up wrong, with the blue in them, and start walking toward the shore across a bay that is now solid enough to carry them. Melisandre stands on the deck of the Fury with her hands in a brazier and her red eyes wide, and the flames in front of her turn white and then blue and then go out entirely, and she screams, not in pain, but at what she has just seen in them. Stannis Baratheon goes into the black water with his sword still burning, and the light of it is visible under the ice for a surprisingly long time, going down. Act 6. The Glass Reckoning. The Mudgate holds for 6 hours, which is 4 hours longer than anybody expects. Tywin Lannister, who has been left in command of the walls because nobody else wanted them, gives the order at the moment the dead reach the ditch, and 11,000 jars of wildfire go over the battlements in 90 seconds, and the world turns green. And it works. That is the thing nobody in this story is prepared for, on either side. Wildfire burns the dead. It burns them completely, and they do not get up. And for 1 hour, the defenders of King's Landing stand on the wall and watch an emerald hell eat 6,000 corpses down to nothing. And the mist pulls back from the walls, and men who have not slept in 4 days start laughing and slapping each other on the back. Tywin Lannister says to the Master of Alchemists, Horse, watching it burn, "More. Everything you have, every jar, every cache, the ones under the sept, the ones under Rhaenys' hill, all of it. Because for the first time since this started, somebody down there is having to change his plan." Down on the plain, the King of Winter is looking at fire his army cannot walk through, and doing arithmetic. And then Robb Stark walks into the wildfire himself. He does it in front of everybody, living and dead. And the green flame comes up around him and does not go out. It goes white. The heat goes into him the way water goes into dry ground, and comes out the other side as something else entirely. And where he walks, the burning wildfire cools and thickens and stops being fire at all, until there is a black path through the middle of an emerald hell, with a boy walking down it. By the time he reaches the Mudgate, the temperature on the plain has dropped so far that the surviving wildfire has set solid in its jars. Robb Stark does not use a ram. He puts his palm flat on the ironwood and the water in the wood, every drop of sap in every plank, and the iron banding, and the mortar and the stone around it, freezes at once and expands, and the Mudgate does not swing open. It comes apart from the inside into 10,000 pieces with a noise like the end of the world. Robb Stark says to no one in particular, stepping through, "Open." And on the wall above, Tyrion Lannister watches the king in the north walk into King's Landing through a hole he made by touching it, and understands, with total clarity, that every plan he has made in his entire life has been made in a world that no longer exists. Act 7. The Throne of Ice. The throne room is dark and silent and thick with frost. Every torch in it went out an hour ago. The Iron Throne is furred white, the 1,000 blades of it gone soft-edged under rime. Joffrey Baratheon is sitting on it because Tywin put him there and told him that a king is found on his throne, and he is crying, and his crown has slipped down over one ear. Tywin Lannister stands at the foot of the steps with his sword drawn and does not run, because in 40 years of a life spent doing appalling things extremely well, Tywin Lannister has never once run from anything. Tywin Lannister says to the shape coming up the hall, "You may take this city. You have taken it. But understand what you have actually done, boy. You will never rule a single day of it. Men do not follow that. They flee from it. In 10 years, there will be nothing between the wall and Dorne but ice and quiet, and the last thing you own will be a very cold chair. You have not defeated my house. You have become the exact thing your father spent his whole life standing in front of." Robb Stark says to Tywin Lannister, "My father stood in front of it, holding a piece of paper about the color of your grandchildren's hair, and you had his head taken off on a set of steps. My father believed in the law, my lord. I believe in ice." He does not draw a sword. He puts one hand on Tywin Lannister's breastplate, almost gently. There is no flame and no blast. There is a sound like a lake freezing over and fast forward, and Tywin Lannister goes white from the sternum outward in about 2 seconds. Skin, then eyes, then the sword in his hand, and what is left standing at the foot of the Iron Throne is a statue of a man in armor, perfectly detailed, faintly blue, with his chin up. Joffrey Baratheon does not get a sentence out. He gets a sound, and then he is a smaller statue, sitting down. Robb Stark, 16 years old now since the turn of the year, though nobody has mentioned it and he has not thought about it once, climbs the steps between them and turns and looks out over an empty hall, and puts his hand on the arm of the Iron Throne, and the throne begins to change. The blades soften and run and refreeze upward, growing, splitting, stretching into a spire of black ice and darker glass that goes up and up until it disappears into the frost on the ceiling. He sits. He leans his head back, and through the weirwood net, which is wide open to him now and has been for months, he lets himself feel the whole of the country at once. Every heartbeat between the wall and the summer sea, every fire being lit against a cold that is not going to stop, every mother in every village listening at a door. 200,000 people, terrified, in the dark. He waits to feel something about it. Nothing arrives. That is the last payment on the schedule. He sits very still on a throne of ice in an empty room, doing a slow inventory of himself, opening one door after another, and finding every room behind them already dark. The doors at the end of the hall bang open. Jon Snow has ridden 1,000 miles in 19 days. He left Castle Black the morning the ravens stopped coming south and the mist stopped moving north, and Maester Aemon told him what the ravens had gone quiet about. And Jon walked into the Lord Commander's chambers, put his black cloak on the table, and left the watch. 4 Winterfell men who had taken the Black under Ned Stark's own justice put their cloaks down beside his and came with him, and not one of them has asked him what the plan is, because there is not one. He is a deserter now, with a death sentence on him in every kingdom that still has a law. He has Longclaw. He got into the city 4 hours ago through a broken postern on the riverside, and he found his sister first, alive, in a cellar under the Street of Flower, with Sir Dantos Hollard and a frozen blue rose in her sleeve. And he left the 4 Winterfell men who rode south with him standing over her, with instructions to get her out of the city, whatever they heard happening behind them. Behind him now, Ghost is standing in the doorway with his hackles up, and he will not come one step further into the room. He is the only warm thing in that room. It is the first thing anyone would notice. His breath comes out of him in great ragged clouds in the frozen air, 19 days of hard riding still in his lungs, his face raw with windburn, snowmelt running off his cloak onto marble that has not been above freezing in a week. He is breathing hard. Nothing else in that hall is breathing at all. Jon Snow says to Robb Stark, "Robb." Robb Stark opens his eyes. They are not blue anymore. They have gone white, edge to edge, no iris and no pupil at all. Jon Snow says to Robb Stark, "I know what they did to Father. I know what the Freys were going to do to you. Whatever you agreed to in that Godswood, I am not here to argue about whether they deserved it. I am here because Bran is at Winterfell, and Rickon is at Winterfell, and Sansa is somewhere in this city right now. And there are 200,000 people out there who never cheered for anything, and every one of them is going to freeze. It is finished, Robb. You won. Tell it you are finished." Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, and the voice is his own, which is somehow far worse than if it had not been. "I have been trying to for 6 days. It does not have a mechanism for finishing, Jon. I did not notice that when we were negotiating, because I was 15 and I was very angry, and I asked for an army that never stops. I got exactly what I asked for. That is the joke. Every single term has been honored." Jon Snow says to Robb Stark, "What did he say to you? At the Twins. Every man in that army came home with the same story, and not one of them heard it. What did Walder Frey say?" Robb Stark is quiet for long enough that Jon thinks he is not going to answer. Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, "Brother." He says it flatly, the way a man reads out a figure from a ledger. Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, "That is the word. A thing that had been dead for 4 minutes leaned over to me and called me brother, and I understood in that moment that I had misunderstood the entire arrangement. I thought I was hiring an army, Jon. You do not hire them. There is no employment in it. They were never my soldiers. I was simply the first of them to still be walking around warm, and every single thing that has happened since the Twins has been the rest of me catching up to Walder Frey." Jon Snow says to Robb Stark, "Then what happens now?" Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, "Now it needs a commander for the last ranging, and it has one, and it does not much matter whether he agrees. So I am going to ask you once, while there is still enough of me in here to be asking. Come with me, or take that sword off your back and be the first thing in the new world that dies for a reason." And then he says it. The same word Walder Frey said to him in the snow at the Twins, in the same flat tone, to his own living brother standing 40 feet away with a sword on his back. Robb Stark says to Jon Snow, "Brother." Ghost in the doorway starts to growl. And here is the thing that neither of them says out loud, and that the whole of this story has been walking toward. The tyrant is dead. The family is avenged. The throne is taken. That should be the end. Except that if you have been paying attention, you have already worked out that the Night King never wanted any of this. He did not need a war in the Riverlands. He has no use whatsoever for the Iron Throne. 8,000 years of cold patience were never about conquering the South, because you do not conquer something you can simply outlive. What he needed was a door on the warm side of the wall, held open from the inside by somebody with the blood to hold it. He needed an embassy. And on a night in a Godswood, an angry boy, with nobody standing behind him, volunteered for the post. Which is why, when Jon Snow looks into his brother's white eyes across that hall, he is not looking at a king. He is looking at a clock. And every one of us watching can see, from here, that it is almost finished running. In the frozen dark behind him, the statue of Tywin Lannister makes a small, dry, cracking noise. Then another. The screen fades to black. That is our theory. Robb Stark was handed a world in which his father's honor was worthless, his sisters were hostages, and the law was a story rich men told each other, and he went into a Godswood and got a better offer. Every term of that offer was honored to the letter. He avenged his father. He destroyed House Lannister and House Frey down to the stones. He won the war outright in a single winter without losing a single battle. And the price was collected so gradually in such small pieces that he never once had a moment where he could have pointed at it and said no. Did Robb Stark sell his soul, or did he simply pay the going rate for a justice this world was never going to hand him? And here's the one that matters. When the raven came about your own father, and every law in the world had just proved worthless, are you certain you would have walked out of that Godswood? Two things you may not have caught. Jon Snow did not come into that city alone, and Ghost, who has followed him through every mile of it, stopped dead in that doorway and would not put a single paw on the floor of that hall. Both of those matter, and both of them point at the same thing. Robb worked out at the Twins what he had actually signed. What he has not worked out, what he does not know while he is sitting on that chair asking his brother to join him, is why the thing on the other side of that heart tree wanted a Stark specifically out of every angry lord in Westeros, and what the last payment on that schedule is going to be. Ghost knows. That is why Ghost will not cross the threshold. If you want to know what that sacrifice is, and why the real war, the war of the two wolves, has not actually started yet, there is exactly one way. 8,000 likes on this video, and we pull the sheet off it. Subscribe so you do not miss the moment the North stops being human at all. So tell us in the comments, and be honest about it. If you had been standing in that Godswood with a raven in your hand, and your family's killers laughing 900 miles away, would you have shaken the monster's hand? Type ice if you would have taken the deal. Type honor if you would have walked away. And if you think there was a worse word Walder Frey could have whispered than the one he chose, put yours in the comments. The best of them are going into part 2. Until then, remember, the night is dark and winter is already